Looks like it's still setting up. And we're up. Hello, everyone. Jason here from Chartmetric. I'm manager of the Insights team. Present with us today is Andreas, our president of strategy, marketing, operations, Rucker, who is our digital strategy lead, and Shashank, who is our data analyst on the Insights team. We were all somewhat involved one way or another in the 6MO report. Eling and Michelle will also be tuning in a second here. I don't want to do a double intro because we kind of baked that into this video that we're about to play for you. But it's a 40-something minute video. We go through all parts of 6MO. So if you want to chat with us live, like in the chat on the YouTube, just look to the right of your screen. You should see a group chat on the right, and we're on there. We're on there right now. So if you want to say hi, introduce yourself to everyone else in the group, please do so. If you have any questions about any particular part of the video, please feel free to ask us. Part of the advantage of doing it this way is we get to kind of answer all of your questions over a longer period of time. So please do engage with us there. And then after the video is done, we'll be here back in this mode to answer any kind of questions live. So please do so. Please feel free to participate. We're happy you're here. And without any further ado, I will go ahead and start this video. Hi everyone, Jason here at Chartmetric. I am the manager of the Insights team and one of the co-editors of 6MO, which is what you are looking at right now. 6MO is a semi-annual report that we do as a company that is basically all the data that we collect. Chartmetric is a music analytics company, so we collect information from all of your favorite streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, so on and so on. A lot of the social media platforms that you're very familiar with that are relevant to the music industry, such as, of course, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And we kind of mix them up and we try to filter through the past 6 months. This particular report is the first half of 2021. And so it's January 1st to June 30th, 2021. And we kind of go back, relive those moments, see what trends are kind of bubbling up and relevant to you today, and then to see how relevant they'll be for the rest of 2021 and maybe even 2022. So the idea is to discover some new music, understand where you might be able to sit and take advantage of some of these trends, and then hopefully enjoy it while we're doing it. So if you're not familiar with us as a company, Chartmetric, you can check us out at chartmetric.com. We are a music analytics company that we provide a subscription-based platform where you can subscribe and understand the kind of market level data environment of the music industry. So we have over 25 different data sources that we collect information from, and we try to present them in a way that you can, log into our website. We have a mobile app as well, and then Okay, sorry, I'm on the wrong link. Bucker? You muted on that?
Yeah, but I think we just gotta keep rolling.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can understand where, let's say, your artist roster, or if you're an indie artist, or if you are in the live scene and getting back to post-COVID scheduling, you can understand, who are the emerging artists in, say, let's a particular market of the world. Or if you're really into playlist strategy, what has been the most valuable playlist for artists of a certain genre. There are a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data, and we provide that environment for you to do those things, depending on where you sit in the music industry. So this report is a way for us to kind of communicate that in a less heavy way, because a lot of times, there's a lot of analysis involved. And so to have a few people just kind of take the time to just speak it to you and just, words is helpful. So that's what we're doing here. This 6MO is in 3 different parts. For 1 second, let me back up. There's 5 editions of 6MO. This is the 5th. There's 4 previous editions. If you want to check them out, they're at chartmetric.com/6MO. But for this particular 5th edition, we have 3 parts. The first 2 revolve around breakthrough music. So by that, we mean music that has basically gone viral from the January to June timeframe. So it's not necessarily the top music. Some of it is. There's going to be a lot of Olivia Rodrigo in here. but a lot of it is viral music, which you maybe might not hear in the next 6 months, and that's okay. But the idea again is to show you who's risen, who's the cream of the crop, because otherwise we'd be probably hearing about mostly the same 10 or 20 artists every report. So our focus is on kind of like who's risen during this time period. And this first part is breakthrough music platforms. After that, we're gonna have breakthrough on social media platforms, so people who have gained a lot of followers, so on and so forth. And the last part is kind of like always a special part of 6MO. And this particular edition features a data set revolving around pronouns and gender equity. And so we've written kind of a separate piece on this. Michelle, one of our analysts, she wrote about our methodology of how we generated this data set, which is basically 454,000 unique artists who we've looked at their bios on streaming platforms and been able to use the pronouns that they use themselves to describe themselves and infer genre from that. It is highly editable. If you are an artist or your team wants to change, if we've gotten it wrong, by all means, it may be wrong and we don't mean that. Please do reach out to us at equity@chartmetric.com. If you have a Chartmetric account, you can click on your artist profile, and then right next to your pronouns, you can change them. We have that available on the front end. The idea, though, the motivation for that is to really seek kind of this goal of an equitable music industry. Unfortunately, males, people who identify he, him, have dominated a lot of the parts of the music industry for a long time now. And so to try to provide some data to it gives us at least a foundation from which to work with and some key performance indicators on how we can maybe improve those things in different parts of the music industry. But we need to start somewhere, and so we thought we would at least take that step forward. So that's that. So this first part, again, breakthrough music platforms. It revolves around Spotify monthly listeners, YouTube channel views, Pandora streams, and also Shazams on a global level. So without further ado, I'll bring upon our digital strategy lead, Rutger. Rutger, take it away.
All right, so as Jason explained, this next section deals with the artists that grew the most on music platforms from January to June of this year. What we're going to talk about in particular is Spotify growth. So artists who grew the most on Spotify with regard to their monthly listeners. So monthly listeners is a bit different than stream counts, because stream counts are more of a consumption metric. So, one person could stream a track 1 million times, whereas monthly listeners is really telling you how much this artist grew their audience. So with this section, we're looking at which artists grew the most or expanded their audiences the most, essentially, from the beginning of the year to the midpoint of 2021. So let's dig in. Off the bat, we don't see much of a surprise in terms of the top couple of artists that are on here. So number one is going to be Masked Wolf, which if you know the track Astronaut in the Ocean, you can understand why it's on here. It was a huge track this past year. And you can see that he absolutely, blew up from about 1 million monthly listeners at the beginning of the year to, all the way to verging on 30 million by May. So that's huge growth. If we look at Maneskin, also another unsurprising inclusion on here. This band really gained steam after they won the Eurovision Song Contest, and they went from 2.5, 2.8 million monthly listeners at the end of May to like 40 million by June, which is also very, very significant growth. So these artists really expanded their audiences during the first 6 months of 2021. If we toggle to number 7, we see Olivia Rodrigo, which is perhaps not a surprise that she's on the top 10 because her track was arguably the biggest sort of breakout track of the year. But maybe a little surprising that she's not higher up on the list. But again, we're talking about monthly listeners, so maybe she didn't expand her audience as much, but people could have been streaming this track way more than the other tracks. So let's move on to YouTube now. So with YouTube, we really are talking about consumption. So we're looking at YouTube channel views. So how many views an artist's channel got, essentially. And for this particular section, how much growth they had in terms of that particular metric. So number one, not surprising, Olivia Rodrigo, which goes to the argument that even if her audience didn't expand as much as, say, Masked Wolf or Maneskin, consumption was very, very strong. So she's number one in terms of YouTube growth. She went from, let's see, around 11 million channel views at the beginning of the year to topping 1 billion by June. So that, of course, is huge growth. Again, we see Masked Wolf with his Astronaut in the Ocean track. Also huge growth, but he still did not end up even half of where Olivia ended up. Some other breakouts were actually Japanese pop rockers, Awesome City Club. So they hit number 7 with channel view growth. They got all the way to around 60 million views, but they started at just around 3.3 million or so. Another one is Carol's Daughter at number 6, who's sort of like a SoCal alt-pop singer. She didn't reach the heights of some of these other artists, but judging from where she started at, which was around just 1 million, she, multiplied that by like 20 times or so. And then we also have Ghanaian Afrobeat star Giaki, hope I'm pronouncing that right, at number 8. And a similar story here to Carol's Daughter, but there is a significant inflection point right around March where growth really starts to take off, and they end up with around 30 million views by the end of the period that we looked at.
Thanks, Rucker. So this next one is about Pandora stream count growth over the past 6 months. If in case you're not based in the US, the Pandora is a US-only streaming platform right now and is usually identified and connected to a lot of lean-back listening. So people who just want to put on a Pandora radio station and they don't want to look at their screen for the rest of the night. The way it works, if you're not familiar with it, back in the 2000s, Pandora, you would seed a Pandora radio station with an artist you like or a track you like and its own algorithm, because it has its own kind of internal recommendation system based off their music genome project, is what it's called. And it'll just recommend music that you can thumbs up, thumbs down, and modify the Pandora algorithm kind of as you go. And they do have a premium version that functions a lot like the paid-for subscriptions on, Apple Music or Deezer or Spotify, but they also have, still the radio version, which drives a lot of consumption on their platform. Another thing that it's known for is being highly associated with country, U.S. country specifically, the genre. So no different in the past 6 months from January to June 2021. 6 out of the 10 kind of most viral songs that kind of made a name for themselves in this particular report on Pandora were indeed country. You can check them out here later on in the report. One thing I do want to share, though, is even though country is super popular, you also have a lot of TikTok hits, which of course can be country as well. In this particular case, they aren't. But 2 that we found was the US-based singer Giveon with the ballad Heartbreak Anniversary, which went really super viral on TikTok. It broke in March 2021. You can see this pattern here. Another one was the Australian rapper Masked Wolf, which you've already heard about, but Astronaut in the Ocean, which hit number 10 in Pandora, but also, was big in TikTok, and it kind of transferred that success to Pandora as well. But for example, here's the Heartbreak Anniversary graph. And one thing I do want to point out
which is pretty cool. Is you see all these like kind of ups and downs, peaks and valleys here. Obviously, this is where it broke. So this was the big point for Giveon. So I'm sure he was very happy to see this. And this up and down behavior is something that's really cool and unique to Pandora. So what it turns out when we looked at the dates versus the days of the week, it tended to be Monday through Friday. So it's really cool because if you're familiar with YouTube consumption, usually, depending on the artist or the type of music, but a lot of times it'll kind of do the same thing, but on the weekend. So it's almost like Pandora is kind of like your work streaming platform where, you just kind of put things on because you're busy looking at spreadsheets like us, or doing something different. But that's kind of like Pandora is maybe even seen as kind of like a Monday through Friday workday thing. Whereas YouTube is kind of like, hey, let's all kick back and have fun on the weekend type of platform, which is something that we've seen with at least a large number of artists on YouTube. So interesting little note, maybe it's something you can take advantage of.
Okay, so let's talk Shazam. So for those not familiar, Shazam is a really cool music discovery tool that works off of audio fingerprinting. And basically what that means is that if you hear a track in a bar and you open up Shazam, or if you have an iPhone, you ask Siri, what song is this? And hold it up to the song. It'll tell you through audio fingerprinting, so like matching up the waveform, what track it is, what artist it is, etc. So what we're looking at here is artists or tracks, in this case, that had the most Shazam growth in the first 6 months of 2021. So let's dig in to this section. At number 1, it was super interesting. It's You Are My Sunshine, which was this particular track is a cover, and it's by an Italian artist, actually, Antonio of Italy. I believe he's actually a barber. This is his full-time job. But his track got picked up for the Luca soundtrack, which, any Disney, Pixar animated film is going to have a huge effect in terms of what music it chooses to, what music the producers license. It's called a sync license. And so because this track was in that movie, and that movie was, really popular, this track then saw an uptick in Shazams. And we see that a lot with Shazams, that relationship between TV and movie syncs and Shazam growth. So people are watching, a Netflix show, in this case, Luca, and they ask their phone, what track is this? And then tells them, and then we get this important growth here. So that's good for him. Just to sort of tease out that trend a little more, Boom Boom is actually a track that was licensed by Old Navy for one of their commercials, and that really did big things for the artist Teddy Gold. So it ended up at number 5 in terms of the most Shazam increases. And there's also Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight, but a cover of it by the Pronoun. And that had a placement in Netflix's Cobra Kai series. So again, we see that TV sync Shazam relationship as well. There also appeared to be a TikTok relationship. It's difficult to say exactly the nature of how TikTok virality translates to Shazam counts, but Shazam does have a pop-up feature where whatever app you're in, it will sort of tell you what track it is. So it's possible that has something to do with it, especially when it comes to Laurel's Appetite. And this track was actually used as a sort of promotion for the app feature. So sort of makes sense that it had this crazy growth as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rucker. So the next section is breakthrough social platforms. If you're following along in the report, you can just go and click the upper level navigation on breakthrough social, and we're going to go through 4 different social platforms in the same vein, going from January 1st to June 30th, who got the most viral, so to speak, on those particular platforms. In this case, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Wikipedia. So without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get into the platform that we all know and love in 2021, TikTok. Everything that you see in terms of the top 10 that went viral, again, this is like viral in terms of TikTok posts. A lot of the top ones that you probably know of from the first half of 2021, you won't find here. This is just going from the beginning TikTok post count above a certain threshold to the count at the end of the 6-month period. Sometimes a lot of these hits came in February or March and went viral kind of, a few months in, but that was the whole idea, is trying to catch, whatever went viral within this particular time period, but not necessarily the biggest ones where Charli D'Amelio was like all over them. So there's a lot of different ones to look at here. You can read more about them. One thing I did want to point out, though, is there's definitely like a type of virality that happens in some tracks versus another. For example, if you look at the number 1 track here, for example, it's Fendi with the Dutch DJ Rehab, Rakim, who is a Russian rapper, and Smoke Perp, the US rapper. You have kind of like a slow burn, which seems to be, I would imagine, I am not a marketer myself, but a really awesome happening on TikTok, as opposed to the kind of instant virality that you'll see with some of the other tracks. For example, here, the number 3 spot, it's Brazilian. I'm not going to try to say it. But obviously a great moment that happened for them in late May, early June, but you can kind of see it kind of tapers off it here. The nature of TikTok, if you're familiar with it, it's very much, it makes sense. You have your period of virality, but then after a while, it just doesn't pop up in the For You page anymore. But it seems that it would be a great marketing tool or asset to have it have relatively a slow burn that happens over months on a platform that is so dependent on virality like TikTok. But that's something to take note of. Just as well, you'll notice for some of the tracks after a few months, the total post count actually starts to go down. There's probably a few reasons behind it. One of which is maybe at the platform level, maybe there's some scrubbing of, maybe there's content rights issues, or users maybe deleting some of their posts that maybe had the track. After some time, they scrub their profile, so on and so forth. But sometimes activity or trend that we'll notice on a particular track after a certain amount of time. Moving on, so we have Instagram. So artists that grew the most on Instagram over the past 6 months. Of course, we're going to have a lot of Olivia Rodrigo again, but she came in at number 9 because we're going by percentage growth here. And 2 artists that I'd like to highlight here are Sick Kick, who is a Canadian producer, and also Lubelin, also a Canadian producer. They took the number 6 and number 10 spots. And you can see for Sick Kick, he's a DJ. He worked on DMX kind of tribute remix. He's got the cool MIDI light up instruments and plays that. And it was a really dope remix of a lot of DMX songs when he passed away. And this was in mid-April of 2021. And you can see, had been making music for a while now. Definitely suggest checking out his YouTube channel. But had very viral growth starting from that tribute, because the algorithm kind of went to work for him and he grew highly. Same thing happened for Lublin, who right before the turn of the new year, he had a funny kind of meme kind of internet. He had some music set to an internet meme. Let's just put it that way. You can read more about it here. But it happened right before the new year, and you saw the crazy growth. And as you can see, there's a couple more valid points that happened for him, one in mid-January and one in mid-March. So obviously someone who knows how to take advantage of growth. But just to compare, we have a slow burn again with Olivia Rodrigo, who obviously is a very talented artist, also benefiting of a very large marketing machine with a large budget behind her as well. So you see a very slow growth period, but very steady throughout this entire 6-month period. That is huge. I mean, and it looks, I say slow, but you're talking about, looks like anywhere from like 50 to 100K followers per day, which is enormous. So one of the things we noticed at Chartmetric when we look at different platforms are kind of like, everyone loves a viral moment, but to have kind of slow, steady growth over multiple platforms is probably arguably even better thing over the long term. And that's one of the things we try to measure for in our cross-platform performance ranking, which if you can check out that on Chartmetric, that'd be great. Moving on to Twitter growth is our data analyst, Shashank Chowdhury. Shashank, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. That was great. Now moving on to our next section, we have artists with the most Twitter growth. In this section, we had a unique spectrum of voices and artists, but the common theme was the element of surprise and mystery. But naturally, people want to go and check out who they are and what they are, and this reflected in their Twitter followers. Now, getting into the list itself, we had a similar trend last year too, where K-pop and Latin artists dominated the Twitter growth section. Here we have Treasure and Blackpink, but another noticeable individual, Jackson Wang, got in the news, who's very well known in the Greater China area because his K-pop group GOT7 was leaving the JYP Entertainment in January. Another number 2 on our list, Corpse, was very well known for streaming his and narrating on YouTube his real life horror stories and crime stories. But over here, he became famous because he was streaming a very well known and popular game, Among Us, and one of his soundtracks went viral. So yeah, you can see that garnered a lot of attention. Now we have 2 Brazilians on the list itself, Pablo Vittar and Z Felipe. They both launched some sentimental videos about their engagement announcement and pregnancy announcements respectively. So that garnered a lot of attention on Twitter. Now, honorable mentions to Sweetie and Doja Cat, who released a collaborative single called Best Friend, which got a lot of attention over here. Now, moving on to the next section, we have artists who had the most Wikipedia growth in terms of views. This section was dominated by artists who were unfortunately died in the first half of the year, but nonetheless, we have Olivia Rodrigo. Of course, she is here, who because of her single Driver's License, and she launched her debut album Sour 2 in May 2021, which charted at number 1 worldwide. She made a guest appearance in SNL, and that unsurprisingly made her pretty popular on Wikipedia. We have another artist and Grammy-nominated R&B singer, Andra Day, who took the role of Billie Holiday in February, and she was one of the leads over there, and she won the Best Actress in Motion Picture. So, not surprisingly, she was pretty trending on Wikipedia. But we have another artist, Ollie Alexander, who did not only star in the TV series It's a Sin, but he launched another cover of Pet Shop Boys along with this new the TV series he launched. Now we have Scottish artist Sophie, who was well known as one of the most innovative artists, and she was one of the most influential transgender artists in the world. She suddenly died at the age of 34, which shocked the whole world, including the LGBTQ community, and which led to a spike in the Wikipedia views. And this story was like the similar story of DMX, who passed away in April, and a lot of crowd was gathered outside Barclays Center to pay their respects. Again, you can see the numbers and statistics on our report here itself, the view counts and how much they grew by. Now, moving on to the next section, we have Michelle, who will be talking about pronoun distribution and gender equity in the music industry. Stay tuned. Thank you.
So in the last edition of our report, the second section focused on refreshing our CCO Chaz Jenkins concept of trigger cities and the algorithmic effects that they can help artists achieve. And this time around, the second half of our report switches gears to look at how data analytics can help highlight and further gender equity in the music industry. So the background on this data set is that there have been many different voices calling for gender equity in the industry. So this isn't a new topic by any means, but it was one that we wanted to do our part for, but also wanted to make sure that we were doing it in a way that was helpful and inclusive, ethical, and respectful to everybody involved. So as you would probably expect, there is little public information on gender, but there is more public information on pronouns, which is why we started to create a new data set from this information. Our analysis this time around is based on pronouns because this is a larger data set that we were able to gather. However, we're aware that pronoun usage and gender identification don't correlate for everybody, which is why we have a separate gender data set as well. And we're hoping to grow both data sets with the contribution of people on our platform too. So the creation of these databases is only a small and first step in better understanding and answering the issue of gender equity in the industry, but it's a way that we hope to contribute and help address and be part of the solution for it.
So before I hand it over to Michelle to really dig into the nitty-gritty of this data set, I just wanted to go over some sort of population level findings from this pronoun data set that we're developing. So if we dig into this data, I can zoom in a little bit so the numbers are a little bit more legible. So 454,467 artists, at least at the time of publishing this report, were tagged with some sort of pronoun, whether that be he, him, she, her, they, them. Of those 450 or so thousand, 301,398 artists were solo artists, so no band. And of those solo artists, the vast majority use he, him pronouns, whereas the minority use she, her pronouns, and a very, very small minority use they, them pronouns. If we break this down in a little bit more of a digestible way, that comes out to roughly a 4-to-1 ratio in terms of he, him to she, her. If we look at bands or groups of some sort, we found that around 153,055 artists are a group of some sort. With groups, it was more difficult to then, determine individual pronouns of each member because we did this from their DSP or their streaming platform bios, and obviously it's going to be difficult to parse out every single pronoun from every single member. A lot of the time, bands won't list every single member or their pronouns. So take the following data with that caveat in mind. 558 groups, so of those 150,000 or more that were groups, were all he, him pronouns, and only 30 were all she, her, so all identifying as female. 152, so what that means is the vast majority, so 152,467 bands that have members or have members with either a mix of pronouns or they have pronoun usage that we just couldn't confirm because it was just too difficult to parse out each individual data point. But that's something that we're going to continue trying to improve upon, whether that's, looking at the portion of pronouns within a certain band or We haven't fully figured that part out of it yet, but this is where our data set stands as of now.
So our first look at pronoun distribution for artists was by the tracks with the most number of streams or views in our database across 3 platforms, Spotify, Pandora, and YouTube. Unsurprisingly, the majority of the appearances on these tracks are by solo artists, more specifically those that use he, him pronouns. Feel free to dig further into the numbers and the ratios in our report, but essentially as an overview, if we look at the top 3 artist pronoun categories, we can see that he, him solo artists, she, her solo artists, and he, him groups or bands are the most common on all 3 platforms. The solo artists and bands that identify with he, him pronouns were the most prevalent on Pandora, where it took up 87.5% of the appearances on the platform's top 100 most streamed tracks of all time. That 87.5% was probably so large because there were no appearances at all by she, her identifying bands. Conversely, the appearances on Spotify and YouTube's top 100 most streamed and viewed tracks were also fairly heavily skewed towards both solo and group artists that use he, him pronouns. On Spotify, that was 79.2% of the total appearances, and on YouTube, that was 70.9% of the total appearances. So the reason why we took a look at this streaming and views is because artist royalties are tied to streams and views. So knowing who is behind the all-time most streamed and viewed tracks on a platform can help shed some light on where the largest slice of the revenue is going. And hopefully these numbers can help to highlight this insight specifically and help to demonstrate where change can and perhaps needs to happen next. So we also looked at artist pronoun distribution on the streaming charts for Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube, and we found here that the top 3 artist pronoun categories were still he, him solo artist, she, her solo artist, and he, him group acts. And for both the solo artists and the groups, the individuals and band members who use he, him pronouns are, again, in the overwhelming majority. So it's probably unsurprising, especially since we just went over the artist pronoun distribution by streams. However, charts are also instructive, and we decided to cut from this point of view because charting artists tend to indicate mainstream listener preferences, and they tend to be the artists who currently move the needle most in the music industry. So of these artists, 33% on the YouTube Artist Global Top 100 chart use she, her pronouns or have at least one group member that does. This percentage drops off to 25.2% of the appearances on the Spotify Top 200 chart and 23.5% of the appearances on the Apple Music Global Top 200 chart. So evidently there is progress to be made here for she, her identifying artists, and even more so for artists who identify with pronouns other than she, her, and he, him. So usually those who are non-binary, because they actually had 0 appearances in the charts at all. So before digging into the artist pronoun distribution by genre, I do want to mention beforehand that this is our only analysis that has a slightly skewed data set in that it relies on our pronoun data set that is constantly growing, but at the time of this report was still new and only around 450,000 plus artists. So what I mean by that is that our genre pronoun analysis is limited to these 450,000 plus artists, rather than the millions of artists that we generally have in our database. For our streaming analysis, the charts, and the playlist and pronoun analysis that will follow, we had complete data sets because these were smaller sets in the hundreds. So if there were any data gaps, we were able to manually fill those in. So for the artist pronoun distribution by genre, hip hop and dance and electronic were the least equitable in terms of he, him to she, her solo artist ratios. Pop and indie were the genres with the most equitable distribution that were the closest to a 1-to-1 ratio out of the 7 genres we analyzed. And country, Latin and Caribbean, and rock, punk, and metal were the other 3 genres that were somewhere in between. So this data helps to highlight how the issue of gender equity in the industry could be more closely addressed via these genre-specific communities as well. Finally, we also did a quick dig into artist pronoun distribution on playlists, since playlists are one of the most common and popular ways to listen to music today. So when we looked at the pronoun distribution across some of Spotify's top playlists, Rock Classics, Rap Caviar, and Viva Latino stood out with their ratios most skewed towards he, him identifying solo artists, which may be generally unsurprising given what we just learned about these playlists' respective genres. But in a more interesting twist, 2 of the 7 top playlists that we analyzed actually had ratios that skewed ever so slightly towards solo artists that identify with she, her pronouns. So this distribution on the playlist Songs to Sing in the Car and All Out 2000s, that may come down to genre again, since many of the songs on these 2 playlists are often more pop and indie leaning. But it's something to make note of because it was especially interesting to see that the All Out 2000s playlist, which houses the 150 biggest songs of the 2000s, had slightly more she, her solo appearances compared to the top 4 Spotify playlists of today. Today's top hits, Top 50 Global, Rap Caviar, and Viva Latino. These 4 combined house arguably the top 200 songs of today, and they skew much more heavily towards he, him solo artists. So whether this is because audience preferences have changed over time, whether there are more barriers to entry for she, her identifying artists now, a whole multitude of other factors, that's a whole other question to dig into, but either way, perhaps more can be done to help promote these lesser heard voices in music. So we've touched on some of the thought processes behind this pronoun data set and this analysis, but definitely feel free to learn more about our methodology by checking out our blog article on blog.chartmetric.com. So here. Gender equity is a social topic and it's a community effort, so we really want to be as open and collaborative and transparent as possible to really get this ball rolling. Our blog article is way more detailed, way more in-depth on all of the steps and the thoughts involved in the creation of this data set. So really from the start to where we're at now. So if you want to learn more about how we did this, whether you're interested in the social topic, the music, the data, the analytics, the crossover between all of these areas and how it came together, definitely feel free to check it out. And then please do come check out our pronoun and gender metadata live on chartmetric.com and on our platform. Whether you want to contribute to our database or do some analysis yourself, we created this database to be useful and to be used in the most positive and respectful ways, of course. So as always, we'll be doing more analysis in future and digging into more insights, but we know that there are so many more great ideas and projects out there, and we would love for you to incorporate this data. The pronoun and gender metadata on our platform can currently also be updated. After you log in, please go to the artist profile and you can update their pronouns and their gender there. We do review these submissions to maintain data integrity and also to be respectful of the fact that this information is about people's identities, which we definitely don't want to get wrong. But we do hope that by having it open to everyone to contribute respectfully where they can, will help us all get an increasingly better understanding of the gender and pronoun diversity across the board, at least initially in the recorded sector of the music industry. So that's pretty much it from us this time. We just want to make one more call out that if you'd like to collaborate or if you have any suggestions, thoughts, ideas, constructive criticism, any feedback, please do contact us at equity@chartmetric.com. I promise we're friendly and we really are looking forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. That's a wrap for us. Hope you've enjoyed. This has been our presentation for the 6MO first half of 2021 industry report. If there's any questions you may have for us, please feel free to reach out. We're at equity@chartmetric.com. If you want to reach out about our pronoun and gender equity effort, please join us. We don't want to do it alone. The more the merrier. If you're interested into the product of Chartmetric, just please visit chartmetric.com. Feel free to engage with us on all the social media platforms at Chartmetric. That's Chartmetric with no S. If you want to listen to our podcast, if for some reason you've actually been entertained or informed during this piece of content, we have a podcast as well as a blog. So the blog is at blog.chartmetric.com. Our podcast is on all of your favorite streaming platforms at How Music Charts. Probably if you search Chartmetric too, you should see that as well. But How Music Charts is the name of the podcast and our blog. So check that out and hope you all have a great day. Talk soon. Bye.
And we're back, unmuted. Hey, everyone. This is the team here. Just wanted to see if anyone had any kind of questions, last minute questions before we ended the live stream. Thanks for participating in the chat.
Are there any questions we missed or anything? Or did we cover them all?
I think we got them all. Thanks, Prince Navon. Thanks, Anand, for your questions. Neil, too. Is there anything anyone else on the team. Do you guys want to say anything? Those who aren't aware, by the way, Mike Warner, he's also part of Chartmetric. If you haven't met him, he's a lovely person. He's director of our artists and label relations, also part of the Chartmetric team.
I guess we should just mention that we refresh the content for this report every 6 months. So the idea is just to show, every 6 months what trends in terms of artists or tracks, what music has grown the most in the last 6 months. So we'll have another edition of this beginning of 2022, I imagine, and it'll always be the same URL, but yet we refresh the content just to sort of update, keep up with the current trends and what artists are growing most. And part 2 of it, we always try to do like a new topic. So obviously this time we did gender equity, but I imagine next time it'll be something completely different that we think of.
Cool. Michelle, anything from your side?
Covered most of it.
Cool. Shashank?
It was a very collaborative effort from the team to get to the gender and pronoun data set. And yeah, like if you all have any inputs or updates, please visit our website or please contact us.
Yeah, for sure. We'd be happy to share some of the information from the pronoun gender metadata set, by the way. So please feel free to reach out to us at equity@chartmetric.com. A few people already have, so it's really good to see a lot of people kind of excited and motivated by that effort. So that's how we want it to be. We don't want it to be this kind of siloed proprietary thing. So please do feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to collaborate. Hi, Mohammed Reza. You're very welcome, Alara. Scott will actually be available for future viewing. Yes, it will be. Sorry for the little hiccup if you caught that in the beginning. That's totally my fault. But yeah, it will be available, and we'll probably slice it up a little bit to send some content out to our social media as well. In case you follow us at Chartmetric, please do. But yeah.
By the way, I don't know if we mentioned. Sorry, I don't know if we mentioned, but we might have. But you can actually see the pronoun data in Chartmetric already. So if you go to any artist page, you can not only can you see pronoun data and also like whether the artist is a band or a solo artist, but it's also editable. So if you see any errors or anything, you can edit it on the Chartmetric app, and it should be refreshed, as soon as we get around to approving it, which is, typically Michelle is doing all that hard work, but she's pretty quick about it. So we try to be as accurate with it as possible.
Just to share what it looks like real quick, this is Ma from Denmark, and you can see here, if this is a Chartmetric artist page, if you haven't seen this before, and then you can click it right here. There's this little edit icon here, and you can, there's a gender section, non-binary can break out this other submenu here, and you can choose your pronouns and whether you're a solo or a group, and it'll change in our database. Yeah, just definitely want to emphasize that we're not trying to be prescriptive with it. We're just trying to establish a foundation, so we can work towards equity for the music industry. Mohammed Reza, how can you predict the future of music? Let us know. You do not know the answer, but
Shashank's working on it though.
Yeah, Shashank's working on it. By Monday, Shashank. No, I'm joking.
There are there can always be models that can be made, but predicting the future is like always uncertain there.
We are working though, we are working on some predictive analytics, and by we I mean Shashank. Shashank and our data team are hard at work trying to start with a track level, right? Is that what we're focusing on, Shashank? Yeah. So more to come. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Again, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Feel free to check out this XML report. Yeah, well, and please follow along on our progress on the pronoun and gender metadata set on our socials. And if you'd like to join our mailing list, please do. Feel free to reach out to us at hi@chartmetric.com or specifically about the pronouns and gender equity at chartmetric.com. We got one more. Hi, Freaky Greenfish. What are your future plans for Chartmetric? Fantastic question. I think for us, we want to extend like some more kind of features and tools towards independent artists. It's definitely a group that we'd like to just create more tools for. So I think that's one thing. A second thing too is a lot more kind of future looking analytics, like we've already mentioned. And I think the pronoun and gender metadata set is kind of one way we can kind of take a different look at data. I think a lot of times when we think about it in the music industry, it's all about followers and monthly listeners and so on and so forth. And yes, those things are important. But I think there are also other kind of avenues that aren't just purely focused on, consumption or how big is my fan base versus your fan base. There are other ways to, I think, advance other goals that have other types of value. And so I think that's another way that we can try to create value in the music industry with data. Oh, thanks, Mike. So, all right, y'all. So if there's not anything else from anyone, thanks again for tuning in. We're Chartmetric, and we'll see you on the internets. Talk soon.